The pictures are going to destroy you. And I'm like, we didn't do that. We didn't do that. Those pictures we did not do. He did that to himself, yes. Did we put that on him and then he rubbed around and cut himself? Yes. But we didn't do that.
As we near the 1-year mark since Jodi Hildebrandt was locked up in Utah, a bombshell new lawsuit claims the convicted child abuser ruined countless lives. Not only the lives of the children she helped her partner Ruby Franke hurt, but the lives of people she allegedly tried to help with her so-called counseling. A former client claims after Jodi allegedly destroyed his life, she set her sights on his brother. We're digging into the disturbing allegations for you right now. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey guys, real quick, I don't know if you know this, but the video version of Sidebar is now available on Spotify. That's right, we're so thankful for your guys' support of this show. Us getting Sidebar on Spotify video is truly due to how loyal this audience is, so thank you so much for that. And yes, you can now watch and listen on the go. From Diddy to the Justin Baldoni-Blake Lively legal saga to crazy court moments, it is all on Spotify. So right now, you can scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description to follow Sidebar on Spotify. We've been taking a deep dive into this explosive lawsuit that was filed out in federal court in Utah that accuses one-time mental health counselor Jodi Hildebrandt of using her position to essentially trick people out of their money while simultaneously just wreaking havoc on their families. And we first told you about Michael Tilleman's civil action last week. The 150-page lawsuit names Ruby Franke, Jodi Hildebrandt as defendants, along with the life coaching business Connections Classroom LLC. The lawsuit also names Tilleman's ex-wife, McCall Savage. He's seeking at least $5 million in damages, claiming the defendants were, and still are, running a racketeering criminal enterprise through Connections. That's the allegation here. Now, we've already broken down different parts of this lawsuit in separate episodes, including this overarching review of the lawsuit, as well as the supposed misconduct committed by Jodi on behalf of the alleged criminal enterprise. You can check out all those breakdowns over at our Law&Crime YouTube channel. But what I want to talk about today, I want to talk about some of the alleged teachings and methodology that Jodi apparently returned to time and time again as part of what she called life coaching. According to Tilleman, Jodi used that term instead of calling what she did therapy in order to avoid the moral, ethical, and legal responsibilities and obligations that would go along with a patient-therapist relationship. That this was purposeful to not call it that. That's why it's outside the boundaries. According to Tilleman's lawsuit, after representing that Connections offers run-of-the-mill counseling and self-help services to entice victims already in a mentally vulnerable position, the enterprise then incrementally introduces Hildebrandt's methodology through a series of workshops and counseling sessions conducted through Connections, familiarizing enterprise victims with Hildebrandt's identity as a thought leader to gain trust, and then eventually demanding that victims accept that only Hildebrandt herself can help them achieve betterment of their lives through inflicting pain, punishment, and even physical torture onto others. Now, of course, let's not forget Jodi and Ruby. They are both locked up in a Utah prison after they entered guilty pleas to 4 counts each of aggravated child abuse of Ruby's own children. The pleas came shortly a few months after the women were arrested for holding Ruby's 2 youngest children at Jodi's multi-million-dollar compound in Ivins, Utah, isolating them from the world as they tortured them. Everything from making them stand in the hot sun for hours, denying them food, punishing them for sneaking water, carrying heavy boxes up and down stairs. The abuse was only discovered when one of the victims, the boy in this case, a 12-year-old boy, managed to escape, went to a neighbor's home, asked for him to call the police. It's a really, really horrifying scenario. And when multiple officers showed up at Jodi's home looking for any other children that might be locked away inside, Jodi, if you recall this, seemed genuinely shocked that law enforcement was at her door.
Police officers, open up! Got movement right here? Right there. Contact? Got movement. Open the door! Jodi, I need you to step out.
I have my turn.
That's great. Step out of the house.
No, I'm not going to step out of the house.
Step out of the house.
Step out of the house.
Whoa.
We're just going to see if
anybody else.
Is there anybody else home?
Wait a minute, how do you come in my house?
Right there.
They go into my house.
So have a seat right there.
Do you have a search warrant?
Have a seat right there.
Do you have a search warrant?
Have a seat right there. I'll explain everything after. Have a seat right there.
Do you have a search warrant, sir?
Control 12X11, can you hold there? We're searching the house.
I can tell you what's in the house.
Okay. Just have a seat right there for me.
Do you have a search warrant?
We'll explain it after this.
You can't just come into my house without a search warrant.
We'll explain everything after this, ma'am.
During the months in the summer of 2023, when the children were being abused and Ruby was helping Jodi with the social media and podcasts for Connections, the topics that these two covered became increasingly dark. And right now, the Connections podcast, it is still available on Spotify, but you can't actually listen to any of the episodes, but just looking at the titles kind of gives you an idea of kind of what I'm talking about. And what started early on with well-known mental health topics like understanding triggers and recognizing addiction, plus parenting advice episodes with titles like Parenting in Technology and Parenting, Emotional Development in Children. But those eventually gave way to much more concerning titles like Can I Choose to Break Commandments, Violate Spiritual Laws, Engage in Sexual Deviancy, and Still Call Myself a Christian? And Is There Ever a Time to Control Your Loved One? And it's chilling to note that during those last few weeks before her arrest, Connections uploaded an episode titled Taking Responsibility for Childhood Trauma Through Forgiveness. And the last episode uploaded to Spotify before Ruby and Jodi were taken into custody is called Speaking the Truth About Death. So that goes to the allegation that Connections could potentially lure in new clients with the promise of help from a professional before eventually pushing more concerning content onto them and encouraging them to spend more and more money on things like leadership training sessions and group workshops. Because in his lawsuit, Tilleman provides several examples of how Jodi has allegedly caused him and his family serious harm after he claims that his ex-wife fell under essentially Jodi's spell and fully embraced her radical thoughts on parenting, marriage, and truth. Tilleman says he didn't know about Jodi and Ruby's alleged misdeeds until after they were arrested in August of 2023, which is when he says he started to put two and two together and realized that his ex-wife's alleged obsession with Jodi and her methodology was coming from a really dangerous place, especially for the couple's child, referred to as EJT in the complaint. She's now 10 years old. Tilleman alleges immediately after the arrests and subsequent convictions of Hildebrandt and Franke, and after the horrific nature of Hildebrandt's methodology came to light, plaintiff pleaded multiple times with Savage to discontinue Savage's implementation of Hildebrandt's methodology with Savage and plaintiff's minor child. Savage refused. Savage continues to engage in criminal and tortious behavior against her minor daughter, and plaintiff demonstrating through her words and actions that she willfully does so under the dark delusion, falsehoods, and dangerous and false methodologies promulgated by Hildebrandt. And it continues, Hildebrandt's and the enterprise's methodology establish Hildebrandt as the source of truth. That methodology rests on one central imperative, that to bring those around them into truth and out of distortion, members of the enterprise must act by any means necessary, including through unlawful and criminal activities such as physical abuse, torture, psychological abuse, and brainwashing, even when these actions culminate in murder, as demonstrated by Franke's implementation of the enterprise's teachings through the torture and near murder of her children. So Tilleman says the proof is in the pudding here, that Jodi and Ruby used a dangerous ideology to try to bring Ruby's youngest children into what they called the truth, and they were convicted of horrific abuse. Now, Tilleman states in the lawsuit that when he and his wife divorced, he would see EJT during scheduled visits and started to notice that she had these bruises and these cuts that went largely unexplained. And he says based on Jodi's conviction, one could infer that similar punishments and abuse were being inflicted on EJT by Savage. The lawsuit states, Hildebrandt and Franke fraudulently advertised Connection services by, among other things, omitting that Hildebrandt's methodology requires the torture and physical abuse of children to bring children into truth, and that the torture of two children was occurring in the room next door in Hildebrandt's southern Utah residence, while Hildebrandt and Franke instructed people in their podcast to be honest and humble. But Tilleman asserts that despite Jodi's arrest and conviction, as well as more evidence like body camera video and photos being released to the public, Savage is still allegedly forcing her daughter to live by Hildebrandt's teachings. And Tilleman also claims that Savage's recruitment for the cause went even beyond that. The lawsuit reads, in addition to implementing Hildebrandt's methodology and the enterprise's objectives into her own life, Savage is a principal recruiter for the enterprise, and Savage often uses interstate and foreign wires to recruit membership into the enterprise and further its fraudulent financial scheme through a pattern of racketeering. In addition to using abusive tactics to coerce plaintiff to join the enterprise from at least May 2016 through July 2016, Savage used interstate wires to recruit Jessica Blanche, plaintiff's brother's ex-wife, into the enterprise. During this time, Savage lived in Utah and Blanche lived in Idaho, during which Savage used interstate wires to call Blanche over the telephone at least 20 times to recruit her to the enterprise. Okay, so in case that was a little bit confusing, Tilleman has a brother, and that brother was married to a woman named Jessica Blanche. Eventually, Tilleman says that Savage essentially tried to recruit her former sister-in-law to join connections. Quote, Savage told plaintiff that she was provided by God to save Blanche and plaintiff's brother's marriage. Blanche joined the enterprise and defended Hildebrandt publicly. Blanche posted the following on an online review site. The principles Jodi taught helped me through a really difficult situation. If applied, they can bless your life too. Jodi is an emotional personal trainer. To some, she can come off as intense, but truth is what she is teaching works and is passionate about the truth. Go in knowing you're going to emotionally work, but also know if you do your part, you can find so much peace and joy in your life. And what Tilleman says happened next is just so shocking. Quote, Savage instructed Blanche that plaintiff's brother was in distortion and that Blanche needed to inflict pain, i.e. abuse, on him. After Blanche became a member of the enterprise and in a direct implementation of Hildebrandt's methodology, Blanche repeatedly physically beat plaintiff's brother. On one occasion, Blanche ripped off plaintiff's brother's shirt and attempted to attack him with a knife. Blanche had severely bruised, bitten, and scratched plaintiff's brother all over his body. Blanche was charged with domestic battery. No charges were brought against plaintiff's brother. Savage encouraged Blanche before and after the attack that Blanche was justified in criminally assaulting plaintiff's brother because he was in distortion and that pain will bring him to truth. It continues, in a clear demonstration of the enterprise's manipulation and gaslighting tactics, Savage later contacted plaintiff to explain that plaintiff's brother was in fact at fault for his own assault because plaintiff's brother was in distortion and needed pain to bring him to truth. And Tilleman claims that Savage wasn't done allegedly meddling in the affairs of her former brother-in-law. No, the lawsuit states, Savage later attempted to recruit another romantic interest of plaintiff's brother via interstate wires and thus furthered the objectives of the enterprise through a pattern of racketeering. Around February 2017, Savage sent a message over interstate wires to the woman plaintiff's brother was romantically involved with. Savage was in Utah, the woman was in Idaho. Savage criminally stalked this woman and plaintiff's brother over interstate wires to learn they were dating. Specifically, Savage monitored and surveilled the personal affairs of plaintiff's brother and this romantic partner through regularly monitoring their activities, dating life, social media posts, and the progression of their private relationships, including ascertaining that they were a romantic couple, which resulted in plaintiff's brother and his romantic partner fearing for their safety after determining that an individual unknown to this romantic partner constantly monitored their personal affairs as described above. Without ever meeting this romantic partner, Savage then sent her a Facebook message telling her multiple times that God had told Savage that plaintiff's brother would kill this woman and that God would tell this woman the same thing if she listened. Wow. Tilleman says that Savage falsely communicated about plaintiff's brother, thereby disseminating information about plaintiff's brother to his romantic partner, causing both plaintiff's brother and his romantic partner to fear for their safety after determining that an individual unknown to this romantic partner was monitoring their private affairs and sending them unwanted communications. So, once again, Tilleman is seeking millions of dollars in restitution to cover not only the money and opportunities that he claims he lost to connections and its alleged schemes, but also the harm done that he says to his family. As for Jodi Hildebrandt, she and Ruby, they are both behind bars at the Utah State Correctional Facility in the Women's Ward.
Ms. Hildebrandt committed awful acts of child abuse. From May to August 2023, she and her business partner held 2 children, ages 9 and 11, turning 12, in a concentration camp-like setting in her house in Ivan City. The children were regularly denied food, water, beds to sleep in, and virtually all forms of entertainment. They were isolated from others and were hidden when people came to visit the house. They were forced to do physical tasks like carrying loaded boxes up and down stairs and doing wall sits or sitting against a wall without assistance of a chair or stool for hours at a time. They were forced to do manual labor outdoors in the extreme summer heat, often without shoes or socks. And they were also forced to stand outside on a cement patio in the summer heat for hours and even days. They were beaten, and the 12-year-old was regularly bound hand and foot after he attempted to run away in mid-July. Both children had extensive physical injuries from the abuse that required hospitalization to treat. The injuries from the binding are particularly bad. In addition to the physical abuse, the children were emotionally abused. They each believed to some degree that they deserved what was being done to them. Had the older of the two children not had the courage to run away and ask a neighbor to call the police, heaven only knows how much longer he could have survived. After being caught, Ms. Hildebrandt has shown little to no remorse for her actions. In telephone conversations that will be provided in full to the Board of Pardons and Parole, and which she knew to be recorded, she's repeatedly claimed that she is the victim and the children are the perpetrators. She has gone so far as to say that the things said in this proceeding and covered by the media today will be full of lies. The combination of three factors make Ms. Hildebrandt a significant threat to the community. First, the severity of the abuse she caused to be inflicted on young children. Second, her attitude that everything she did was justified and that she is being wrongfully imprisoned. And third, her training as a therapist and aptitude for using online resources to convince others to follow her guidance.
And during her own statement to the court, Jodi seemed not to really take accountability, instead trying to say that she loved Ruby Franke's children and never wanted them to get hurt.
I sincerely love these children. I desire for them to heal physically and emotionally. One of the reasons I did not go to trial is that I did not want them to emotionally relive the experience which would have been detrimental to them. My hope and prayer is that they will heal and move forward to have beautiful lives. I am willing to submit to what the state feels would be an appropriate amount of time served to make retribution as an outcome.
But the judge wasn't having it.
Ms. Hildebrandt, this circumstance is tragic. It's largely, of course, of your making. By any measure, your conduct in this case was disastrous for these children. Adults are supposed to protect children. Adults with specialized training in particular are supposed to protect children. You didn't do that in this case. In this case, you terrorized children, and the results have been tragic. It's what happened to these children and your philosophy in dealing with them, frankly, seems detached from reality or any objective standard of decency or even common sense. And the court finds that it is appropriate that you serve a prison sentence.
So yeah, Jodi was sentenced in February 2024 to spend at least 4 years in prison. Her sentence maxes out at 30 years, and it'll be up to the parole board to decide if she should be released before then. We'll keep a careful eye on both of them. But that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.